Well, we've measured out how much we need to dig here to get our trail all the way through. It's 188 feet, and it's time to get going with the heavy equipment. So this is still day one, and we're just starting from an area that I had cleared already. So it's fairly level where I'm starting, but almost immediately it is getting to be at an angle that's a bit uncomfortable in the skid steer. So you'll see me using the tilt attachment and starting to take soil from the top right-hand side and dumping it off to the left. This way I have a more level and more stable position to go after the trail. So I just can't plow through this like a bulldozer because it is much more slanted and sloped than it looks in this image. So I take a little bit of soil, move it over to the left on the screen, and that levels out the path up towards the stumps a little bit more. The soil on the trail leading up to this point was fairly sandy, so I'm hoping that I can pretty much push these trees over fairly easily, but some of the larger ones, 3-4 inches in diameter or greater, I definitely need to break out a couple of the roots before I can push it over. So you'll see me dig towards the base of the stump a bit, mostly just to break out the roots that are right in the front, and then I'll be able to push it over. And it's nice having the bucket on the tilt here. I'm adjusting it a little bit just so I can keep, as I'm digging out soil towards the roots, I'm also leveling the trail at the same time, so really multi-function. That's the nice part about this tilt attachment with the bucket versus, let's say, a stump bucket. Certainly a stump bucket could quickly rip out that stump, but then I'd have to switch to the bucket to level the trail, and you'd be switching back and forth from attachments. And so this way, I can keep digging and leveling the trail, and then as I get closer to being ready to take out the stump, I can just push it over more easily. Again, stump buckets are nice. I certainly think eventually I'll have one, but when I'm doing trails at the same time as taking out a tree, I just don't want to be switching back and forth. And now that I've taken away some more of the soil, I'm going to be able to push this stump over. And when I do dig out a bit more dirt, if there's a lot of stumps, roots, organics in it, I do dump that a little bit farther off to the left so that it's not on the trail. I don't want a lot of organic matter in the trail. I'm trying to dig down to clay so that I'll have something that won't erode too much. And really, it's very tight in here. I'm trying to minimize how many trees I knock over. I want to save as many trees as I can, but again, you have to be able to dump the soil that you're taking someplace. So I do need it just slightly wide enough to be able to turn left to right as I approach each of these stumps. And so with that, it's finally going over. And I think if I was cutting through here again as a do-over, I certainly would have left this stump a little bit higher. That tree was not so large that I could have maybe cut it closer to 5 or 6 feet up versus 4 feet up, and it probably would have pushed over a little easier with that extra leverage. But again, the soil here is very dry and compact. So unfortunately, while it is sandy and sometimes it pushes over easy, because there's been no rain, it's not loose. So some of the trees that have tap roots are really cemented in there. So little by little, we're getting through the trail. For now, I'm just going to be pushing the stumps off to the edge or side of the trail in most cases. I do have a grapple, but what I want to be able to do is use the grapple the entire time I have it on there. So I will make sure that I get my trail going end to end the entire way. And once I've got it straight through so I can go all the way around the property, I will use the grapple and come back and clean up all these stumps, and we'll burn the stumps during a non-drought period. So probably during the winter when it's more rainy season, we can burn the stumps when it's permitted and okay to do so. And notice how much dust cloud comes up every time I'm dumping. This soil it is just like powder. It is Tennessee flour. It is making so much dust. I'm sure I'm going to have to clean my air filters thoroughly. It just is so dry. We haven't had rain in a long time. Every bucket I take, it just makes this huge cloud. There's no wind, so it really doesn't even blow out of the way. It's like working with flour, just very dusty. And this is a good example of, attacking it at an angle, and then with how tight this space is, I have to back up quite a ways to dump the roots and things that I've picked up. I really can't turn in that little space that's there without damaging trees I want to keep. So I've got to back up a lot farther to, find a spot where I have enough room to even just turn sideways to dump. So very narrow trails. Doing my best to save as many trees as possible, which will also then cut down on erosion. And this shows pretty well how I'm taking much more material from the right-hand side of the screen versus the left-hand. Notice how the bucket is just filling on that side because it is so sloped. I can tilt the bucket, grab from that side, and so as I continue forward, I'll be on a much more level path. So I can just keep scraping the uphill side and turning slightly and dumping it off to the left-hand side of the screen, which allows me to eventually be much more level. Even though it's fairly tight here, I don't know if I captured it on the screen here, but one of the things I did was I started tilting the bucket rapidly towards the left-hand side on the screen, and that would slide the material in the bucket and help me keep the material I'm dumping then to the downhill side, which really helped level it much faster. The camera is pretty level here. So just again, you can see filling up that right-hand side of the bucket on the screen and then dumping it down to the downhill slope side. So I just keep doing that process and it really minimizes how much of the soil you're disturbing. So I'm doing my best to try and take half from the right-hand side of the screen and dumping it to the left-hand side of the screen. Unfortunately, there probably are some trees that are getting their roots damaged on the uphill side. You know, those roots are kind of growing near the surface. So there's a good chance some of the uphill trees could die in the future. You know, it's unfortunate, but this is a trail that I really need to have come through here someplace. So if they do die, I'll cut them down later. But again, I am doing everything I can to minimize how many trees we need to take out to get through on this trail. Again, this is not for the truck. This is just to get our UTV to be able to drive the chipper and the skid steer through and have an alternative path back to the building site also. So it's twofold. This is for our logging skidding trail, but it's also to make an alternative path to be able to get the skid steer through to where we're eventually going to build our home. This is another example of where I probably should have left that stump a bit taller. That one's probably only 2.5 to 3 feet tall. Should have kept it higher. I thought the smaller ones like this would be easier to push over, but unfortunately some of them have some pretty good root systems. So in the future, I think I'd probably cut everything about 5 feet high to make it easier to push over regardless of the diameter. So I'm working really close to my iPhone camera and tripod right now, and maybe I'm hoping I take the camera out and I get a brand new iPhone. But this tree wasn't too big there that you can just barely see on the edge of the screen, and so I felt confident I could get in there, scoop it out, get it out of there before I move the camera yet again. And unfortunately, I don't get a brand new iPhone. So it's time to move the camera again and keep going for part 3.